everybody. Welcome to the other side of sports. I'm Jeff, and we got Mike and Tracy here. This is our second episode.
We're still on the air.
We're still on the air. Hopefully everybody enjoyed our first episode. And biggest compliment I got was Tracy's laugh, by the way, of the first episode.
So she's going to be self-conscious about it.
So before we get into how was your guys' weekend, because we just got done with a 3-day weekend. How was your guys' weekend, Mike? Anything exciting?
I work for the Valencia County News Bulletin, so I didn't have a 3-day weekend.
But
you know how that works.
We got to talk to the boss, man.
No, that's fine. But no, my highlight was I started my physical therapy today for my shoulder. I had surgery before Christmas and worked me over a little bit. So if I wince in pain, it's not necessarily because of something you said, Jeff.
Oh, good.
So, okay, but Tracy, that was the highlight.
How was your weekend?
It was all right. Pretty low key. Just like Mike, I didn't have a 3-day weekend. You know, there's not really such a thing as that in the newspaper business, it seems like. But
see, you guys picked the wrong side of the table because us business guys, we do get 3-day weekends. But yes, you news guys have to work.
We do.
That's but we pay. But when I was running news organizations, we paid double time. So I actually had a great weekend. I know that's probably a bad thing over there. Boss is sitting over there. Anyway, I actually had a great weekend. President's weekend. Not that I'm sitting here, but it's my birthday weekend. So
happy birthday!
Thank you. I turned 49, and if everybody believes that, we'll go with that.
Then I'm 26.
Good. And Mike, you're still 75?
Yeah. A little under. Over and under, right? You guys can wager on that.
No, but I had actually, because I do, we went and had dinner with my family and my mom and the kids and everything. But really, it was sports weekend for me. Here in Albuquerque, they had the USA Track and Field National Championships. I mean, there's some great Olympic, you're going to see some of these guys in the Olympics. So it was great. My son's real big into track. So we had a great time. And then what I love about New Mexico, Saturday, played golf in 62-degree weather, and Sunday and Monday, I was up in Santa Fe skiing. So that's what I love about that.
So I got a question for you. I watched some of the track on NBC, and continually they were mentioning Albuquerque. And with your TV background, was that a requirement? Because it was almost a little much.
No, so the question I have, I've always argued with my local buddies, is I've noticed that national broadcasters say Albuquerque. And every local broadcaster says Albuquerque, New Mexico, which drives me nuts.
You should know where Albuquerque is.
So I'm like, guys, why do you always say Albuquerque, New Mexico? But no, I don't think so. But the only requirement I know that broadcasts is the New Mexico Bowl. They do have to call it the New Mexico Bowl.
Yeah.
That I do know. So no, I just think they were very happy to be here, and there were some great athletes there. I mean, there was a handful of people. Sprinters specifically that you're going to see in the Olympics. So my son was pretty impressed. And Carl Lewis was there.
Oh, wow.
I had to explain, and he wasn't running, obviously, but he was doing some podcasts and he was doing some interviews. But I had to explain my son who Carl Lewis was, because my son's 15. I said, we're on the way home, I said, just Google him. He's like, wow, Dad, 10 like world championships.
Might be our greatest track athlete ever.
Well, and I tell him all the time, it's like right now you have these track guys that win 1 or 2 golds. I go, Carl Lewis won 5 golds in 2 Olympics, I believe it was, because he did multiple events. So it was kind of great. But anyway, hey, we're going to change the format a little bit because I want to go into what are your odds. And so we're going to go into Kevin right now and talk about how bad he was in the San Diego State game.
That 20-point call didn't work out so well for him.
Exactly. So we'll be back right after this with what are the odds?
And now we're back with Kevin Hendricks. He's the assistant editor at the Rio Rancho Observer. So I've been giving him a hard time all week so far about his pick of the 20-point win by the Lobos over San Diego State.
Hold on real quick. Let's just go back. So he's assistant editor.
Yeah.
Maybe that's what he should stick with. Because I think between the Super Bowl and this week, he's like 1 in 20. And correct me if I'm wrong, Kevin.
No, that's correct. I won't be quitting the day job anytime soon.
So, not to interrupt, but last week when you predicted San Diego State, for the Lobos to beat San Diego State by 20, I was like, man, if it's just 1, I'm happy.
Yeah.
And San Diego State, that's a tough place to win anyway, even that we did it last year. A little off there, Kevin.
Just a little bit. I was worried the Lobos weren't going to score 20 for a while, so that was nice when they hit the 20 mark. Mike also asked me to predict the point spread since we recorded a little early. I said the Lobos would be favored by 3. San Diego State was -6.5, so just a little off on that also.
Right. So going into this week now, what's your prediction? What's going on this week? What's your prediction this week?
Well, it was a rough start to what are the odds, but I know you guys are going to talk about the NBA All-Star game later and what a disaster it was. I loved it. I bet the over. So I was sitting there like.
By the way, in that game, I would always bet the over.
Over. Always hit the over by about 30 points.
Was there even any defense in that game?
Nope. And I was just watching, saying, "Yeah, shoot another three. No defense. It was beautiful."
Okay, so what are you going to bet on this week?
So this week we're gonna get back on track with the Boston Celtics losing to the New York Knicks. New York Knicks money line Saturday night.
That's actually pretty good because the Knicks are playing pretty well right now, right?
Knicks are good. The Celtics are frauds. They're a fraudulent team.
Right. Is that the only pick this week?
That's it. I need a.
What about? Okay, I'm going to put you on the spot. How about tonight's game? We're taped on Wednesdays. Lobos play Colorado State tonight at home.
That's a tough one. I think the Lobos get back on track. Big win for the Lobos tonight.
Well, and they have to. They have to win tonight. There's no ifs, ands about it.
Yep.
All right. Well, we're going to check you out next week and see how you do next week.
Okay. Hopefully it's better.
Better luck.
Thank you.
Thanks for being on. Okay, so I think Kevin's prediction this week: the Knicks beating the Boston, probably more realistic. Look, one thing I've learned is he's probably betting with his heart a little bit too much. I've learned never to bet with your heart, bet with your brain.
It's hard, though.
And look, I wanted the Lobos to win, but there's no way they were going to win by 20.
No,
I mean,
that's a big
there
spread.
wasn't.
that's a big spread.
Yeah.
Anyway, but let's go into that because, we were talking earlier about the NBA All-Star Game.
Yep.
Yeah.
I watched the last 3 minutes of the 168 to 160, whatever it was.
It was,
it was
like
open.
211 to
Yeah,
187 or something like
whatever
that.
it was. It's like, and Mike, you were kind of talking about what a disaster it is. And I've literally kind of stopped watching All-Star games years ago. The only thing I really watch now is the home run derby's fun for Major League Baseball. That's kind of cool.
that.
I taped it, but I watched the 3-point shot competition. The dunk thing's kind of over. And so the skill stuff, it's all right. But the game has been that way for a long, long time.
Oh, it has been. There's no doubt about it. And the commissioner of the NBA, Silver, has warned the players, you got to be more competitive, and they ignored him. And part of it, I think, is injuries. You see those guys, and they jump out of the way, and afraid of playing defense. But at this point, in my opinion, in this particular game, bag it. Don't do it.
Well,
Put it aside, and maybe take the week off. Give the players. We've heard a lot about load management in the NBA. Give them a week off, spread it out, and maybe we can start the NBA Finals before June.
Well, I mean, I didn't even know that the All-Star game was on until I started seeing the outrageous score all over social media. And I was like, wow, that was on this weekend? I had no idea. But I mean, it's not even just the NBA. Like, we had the Pro Bowl on, and I had a difficult time watching that for the NFL. I just felt like I was watching a party. Like you said, MLB. The only part I really enjoy of that is the home run derby. I mean, is it something that's over for all sports?
Well, and it is, and for high school, it's actually really cool. Have a North All-Star game, kids come together and play together.
They take it more serious.
Yeah, and the college, I love watching the college All-Star, the Shrine Bowl or the National American Bowl, whatever they call it now. But yeah, at the pro level, these guys make so much money. But again, let's go back to the business side. It's all tied to revenue, right? And the throwaway weekend after the Super Bowl, at least they were smart enough to make it more of a skills between the Super Bowl. They do it at the same place. All the players are in town. A little bit lighter. I think it's bad TV. Let's just make it very clear. But I think it's more for the community, more for who's hosting it and stuff like that. But I don't think there's a lot of interest anymore in those.
So here's the deal that I heard, that ratings were up significantly. And my theory is people like to watch a train wreck. And so once this word got out that they were playing and the score was crazy like that, people wanted to check it out.
Well, and there's no the last All-Star game I actually physically went to was when when Magic played in it, when he had HIV.
Yeah.
And he dominated, and it was just fun to watch him kind of go out like that. But yeah, I mean, there's never been defense in an All-Star game. It's all about showboating and how many threes you can show and how many 50 points you can do. So yeah, I just don't know. Talk about real basketball. Let's talk about the Lobos.
Yeah.
Clearly, Kevin was off a little bit. But here's what I said going into last week is they had 3 really, tough games, 2 on the road. I told everybody, if we can win tonight, we're taping Wednesday, so if we can win tonight against Colorado State, those 3 games, that's 2-1.
Yes.
I'd be happy with that. We had to win the Nevada game because if we lose the Nevada game, literally you drop to 7th place. But tonight we're right back here. We're losing San Diego. We're in third place by a game. We lose tonight, we drop to seventh place. I mean, so it's key that we have 5 games left. It's key that the Lobos go worst case scenario 3-2, got to be 4-1.
Well, I think they're in good shape for the NCAA tournament. ESPN has them as a number 10 seed in the tournament, and I think they're in good shape. But they can't relax. Okay, they have to finish this season strong, in my opinion. They're talking about maybe 6 teams from the Mountain West going to the tournament. I wouldn't necessarily count on that. I wouldn't want to be that 6th team. But I think they have the potential to make a big run in the NCAA tournament. However, I've got some concerns. A couple of them, I think there are some spots where they maybe have a little bit of maybe a weak spot. And free throw shooting, you look at some of their big players, they're shooting under 60%. Even Dent is shooting about.
Dent's had a couple of bad games.
And he's your point guard, and so he handles the ball a lot. So that concerns me. You have House and Mashburn who are not shooting great. They're shooting under 40%. And so you get against those big physical teams in the NCAA tournament, and that's a problem. And the other thing I would kind of put the red flag up a little bit on is the Lobos are best when they're pushing the ball, when they're running and getting up and down the floor, which is great. But there are teams like San Diego State that are big, that are long, that can keep the Lobos from doing it. So those are my concerns as we start to get closer to the tournament.
Tracy?
I mean, yeah, I think this is not the time to rest easy. I think they need to be pushing forward, not relax, not like, oh, we've got the tournament. No team can do that. So I think they just need to keep pushing.
Well, and I think, first of all, I'll talk about free throws. The games that we went on that win streak and started beating everybody 30, we're literally shooting 93 to 98% from the line.
Yeah.
Right? The games we lost or we struggled in, we were shooting, you're right, Mike, we were shooting 60, 61% from the line. And so that's key, which I'm predicting. You need Mash, you need House in there, specifically House for his energy and for his defense, but you live or die by House, right? Because he's going to make some great plays, he's going to do some stupid things. The issue this year with Mashburn, I believe, is Mashburn led the season last year, led the scoring in the conference. He's always been a mid-range shooter.
Yes, he
right?
has.
He's never been a three-point shooter. Then he got hot in that streak and was hitting all these three-pointers. So if you watch the last couple of games where he went 1 for 9, 3 or 4 of them were from the three-point line or outside his mid-range comfort zone. So I always tell people if he just penetrates, backs out, and hits that mid-range shot, that'll be fine. Yeah. But when he starts extending, it's a little bit now. I've seen Patino. Dent, Dent's playing almost 60, 70% of the time. Mash and House are only playing about 40, 50% of the time. So I think as we get into the conference, I think he's saving these guys. But if you see some of the mixes he's done, I think you're going to see in the Mountain West tournament, you're going to see, it has to be in the NCAA tournament if we make it, you're going to have to go with the taller guards. Absolutely. So I think that's why you see that bench when we win, that bench scores 16, 24 points.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Against Nevada the other night, I think they had 24, 26 points, something like that. Yeah.
I don't know.
It was something like that. And again, against San Diego State, they kind of shut down the middle. Our big guys got a little bit in foul trouble. So I trust Patino. I trust. Now, let me ask you another topic that came up this week that's really big is expanding the NCAA tournament. They went from 64 teams now to 72 teams. I get the argument, and I'd like to hear your guys' perspective. I get the argument because when the NCAA started, there was like
32.
Anyway. No, but it started 16, 32, 64. Yeah. But when the NCAA tournament started, there was like 130 Division I schools, and it's 180. I didn't realize it's like 300 Division I basketball schools now. So they're saying that they should expand it a little bit because of there's more Division I schools. I personally don't think they should expand the tournament. I was okay with them expanding some of the buy-in games, the play-in games, the play-in games. But I want to hear your guys' perspective. Tracy, what's your perspective on expanding the NCAA tournament?
I don't like the idea of it. I think it waters down not only the prestige of getting into the tournament, but what does that do to the regular season? It almost feels like, okay, we're going to keep expanding this, and eventually it's just going to be everybody's in, and you don't want that. And then, the regular season becomes meaningless. What are you playing for if they're letting how many teams in if they keep expanding it? I mean, then what's the reason for the regular season or even the conference championship or tournaments,
Mike, what's your thoughts?
Well, at one point, I think they were talking about having everybody in, and making it like, expanding it for like a month. But I'm not in favor of it. I understand that the smaller schools, my alma mater, Montana, and all these other schools are good teams and don't have a chance to get some of that big money in that. But I just think it just would not be an interesting tournament. It would just take too long. And so yeah, I'm with you, Tracy. Let's just keep it the way it is.
I bring a business side aspect to the show, right? That's kind of why I'm here more than anything else. So again, I think everybody knows, or if you don't know, I worked at CBS Sports for 10 years. I was one of the sports executives. I know how I feel on the business side. I called a couple of my buddies that are still there, and ESPN and CBS specifically, because they control March Madness, completely against it. Because here's what I try and explain to people that no one really takes into consideration. The NCAA thinks more teams, more money, right? Well, if there's not more advertising dollars, CBS, Turner, and ESPN, they may pay more dollars for the tournament, for those extra games. That means production costs are going to go up, right? Because you got the production cost. But there's only so much advertising dollars out there. So I've tried to explain to people, when you add more NFL games, when you add more college games, when you add more NCAA March Madness games, that adds more ad inventory. That dilutes the ad inventory, and there's only so much ad inventory around. So on the business side of it, the network guys are against it because it dilutes the product. And that means they got to, it's not like someone's going to throw in another $1 billion to cover those costs. So that means the networks are actually going to not going to lose money, but they're not going to make as much money or break even more. So that's always a concern on that side. So I just think I think it's just a bad idea. On that note, I know football season's over, but we still always got to talk about football. Actually, today, as we're taping the show, the college football championship was voted on. We know we're expanding to 12 teams. There's a big controversy going on right now because who's going to be left out, who's not. And if you guys, I think you guys we all talked about this before. They're going to 12 teams, which I think is good, right? They've agreed now to go to, it's going to be 6 and 6, 6 conference winners and 7.
5 and 7.
Now it's going to go 5 and 7.
Right. Yeah.
Right. The wild card is the Pac-12, right? And Washington State and Oregon State, which are the two remaining teams left in the Pac-12. And just so everybody kind of understands, the revenue is tied for 2 more years to the playoff system with all conferences. So as long as Washington State and Oregon State stay within the Pac-12, they're guaranteed $8 million each, right?
Yeah.
And so I've always said this. I do believe those two teams are going to eventually, whether it be called the Mountain West or not, I think there's going to be a big West Coast football, basketball conference. I think this year you're seeing 7 teams in the Mountain West that could make the NCAA tournament. I don't think they all are, but I think they could. So the Mountain West has positioned themselves really well to be the power conference of the West Coast, specifically if you had Oregon State and Washington State. But I want to hear your perspective on the 5 and 7, and if the format you guys have read about and what they voted on, do you agree with? You don't agree with?
Well, I think. What do we got? 5 and 7 is how many teams? 13?
12.
Yes, 12.
Thank you.
12.
Yeah.
12
Thank
games
you.
left.
My math, showing off there. So I think that's better than 4 teams. Obviously, which is what we've had. And so I'm fine with it. The major conferences are going to get their league champion in, and then after that, it's the highest remaining 7 teams, which allows somebody from the Mountain West, maybe, to get in. A Boise State or somebody like that. And so it still opens the door for some of these smaller conferences to get in.
Well, and I think because now with the Pac-12 is going to still be around, but I think with the Pac-12 out in a couple of years, right? There's only 4 power conferences. So who's that 5th power conference? Is it Notre Dame? Could it be the Mountain West? So again, I think that's going to be, and I think that's another reason Bronco came to the Mountain West, right? Is because they do see this could be the Mountain West with the other 2 teams could be the West Coast team. So Tracy, what's your thought on the 5 and 7 and how they're formatting it and what they voted on?
Well, I mean, after what happened this year with Florida State being left out, I mean, what more could they have done to prove themselves with the format it was? So I think that's great that they're allowing for guaranteed conference champions to be in. There's still some room for some bias in there when you take the other stuff, but how else do you do it? I mean, it's just, I think there's always going to be complaints. I think there's always
Yeah,
going to
I agree.
be,
I mean,
we should have been there. This team should have been there. But I think they're working to try to find the best solution.
And our listeners, our viewers, prior, I agreed with leaving Florida State out. I understand they're undefeated. I understand, their conference was weak. They didn't play a power schedule like Georgia and some of the other teams. But again, I've always said this, and Mike, you know this, Tracy, you know this. 1 to 10. This year was probably 1 to 8. Any of those teams could have won the national championship. Absolutely.
Yeah.
9 beyond, probably not going to beat the top 6 teams. So going 12 deep, I think it's fair because now you're giving everybody an opportunity, right? You're going to be sharing some of that TV revenue because last week we talked about the NIL, the rich getting richer. Yeah. It's actually the TV revenue that's making the rich getting richer because it's always going to be that way, right? And so, so I think it's good. Just so everybody knows, the top 4 teams get a bye, and the other teams basically play their first round game at home. But let me just talk to you about the money. There's 2 years left on the contract, but ESPN just literally signed a $8 billion contract for 6 years to the playoffs games. So what's driving realignment? What's driving NIL? What's driving everything? It's us, because everybody's complaining about the money. We still keep watching.
We do.
Right? So it's like we keep watching. We're going to continue paying those, and everybody wants these rights. And it's that young demographic on the business side. It's that 18 to 34, 18 to 49 demographic that you may not get on any other. You may not get on primetime TV. You don't get on news. You don't get it during the daytime. So it's that young male 18 to 49 demographic. As we know, we live in this industry. That's what the advertisers want. So even if it's a lost leader, it generates revenue for your other things. So I don't think that's going to go. One of the things I want to bring out, if we're done talking about that topic real quick, is tied to this, and I want your guys' perspectives because it kind of goes to NIL a little bit too, and I don't want to make every week we're going to go back to NIL. But the big thing too this week that has popped up is the portal transfers and NCAA college transfers. And I talked to some friends of mine that are tied to the networks and ESPN. I talked to some friends of mine that are tied to the NCAA. They're all predicting, which I'm completely against at this time, a little bit different. They're all predicting that the portal transfer, you're going to be forced. The NCAA is going to be forced if they get in a lawsuit that the kids can transfer every year if they want, which I think will be bad for sports. But I do think a couple of things. But I just want your guys' perspective. Tracy, what's your perspective on athletes kind of opening up and transferring anywhere?
I think it's bad for the fans. They like to follow their players. They like to see a player come to the team, develop, play with the team, become a star, become a fan favorite, and stay with the team. So, I mean, I understand getting there and finding out might not be a bad fit. Let's try something else. But, I mean, essentially every player being a free agent at the college level every year, I think it opens a can of worms.
Mike?
I can't add anything to that. I think it would be ridiculous. And I understand giving athletes more freedom, and I think what has happened has been good. But why would the courts allow that to happen? I don't quite understand why that would be. Don't you sign, like when you sign your national letter of intent? Isn't that like a contract?
Okay, so here's a perspective. I was on the Sports Animal this morning talking about this with Symbieta and those guys, and you think that. See, this is the farce. This is where I kind of agree with open transfers. I'm happy that you can transfer one time. My proposal would be you can transfer one time if you're unhappy because you get recruited there and blah blah blah. But what's happening is you sign a 4-year you sign a commitment. Well, this is what the public don't realize, and it hasn't changed. You sign a 4-year commitment. It's not a 4-year commitment. It's a 1-year commitment.
Because coaches can get rid of you.
The university. So you agree to a 4-year contract, right, to play 4 years and 5. Right, they can redshirt you, but the university can literally take your scholarship away every year. You literally have to sign. It's a 1-year contract. So you go back in after the season and you sign the next year contract. And I get why the universities do that is because if you don't make your grades, if you don't do this, because you're only limited, you're only allowed so many scholarships, right? So if a kid drops out or a kid flunks out or a kid doesn't get eligible, if that's signed, you've lost the rest of that scholarship if it hasn't been signed for the second year. So it's to protect the universities. I get that. But if you're not going to guarantee these kids 4 to 5 years of education, then they should have the right to leave. Now, I played 5 years of college football. I had 4 head coaches in 5 years, right? So my coach, Ron Meyer, recruited me to SMU. Won the conference, went to the Cotton Bowl. He left to New England. Got a new head coach in, didn't really like the guy. Joe Morrison's turning the program around, convinces me to transfer back here. We come back here, go 10-1. Joe Morrison goes to South Carolina. My first 3 years in college football, I had 3 head coaches, and then I was finished with Joe Lee. My point was, I decided to transfer out of SMU because the regime changed, and it wasn't the guys that recruited me, and I just wasn't one of their guys, right? And so I transferred out for that reason, but I had a red shirt and sit out a year because of that. In today's world, I could have got that free transfer and just kind of played right away.
Right.
So my proposal was, if you get recruited by a coach and he gets fired or he leaves for a better job, that player should have the freedom to move with them because the environment has now changed.
Yeah. And I think that's a valid point, that if the coach leaves for whatever reason, that, those players should then, I agree with that.
That's another topic someday, coaches leaving all the time, coaches getting bought out all the time. But yes, I agree. If a coach, for whatever reason, decides to find greener pastures, so should the athlete.
Well, and it's funny because just on that note, Rick Pitino, who I love to death, Richard Pitino's dad, made a comment last week about NIL and said they should cap NIL, which is cool. Are you going to cap coaching salaries? Right? You're going to cap what the university
You should have been at the news conference where you could have asked that question.
I know. Did somebody ask that question?
I don't think so.
Oh, see, there you go. I don't think Richard would have liked that question from me.
Probably not.
Anyway, well, Tracy, I think we've beaten that horse to death today.
Yeah, I think we can
kind of move on and see what the NCAA does.
Yeah.
But I think it's actually time in our show that we do Mike Power Up. So what's Power Up this week, Mike?
All right, let's bring it on, right? Okay, Michael Cooper, former Lobo, great basketball great.
Absolutely.
Nominated to the Basketball Hall of Fame. And obviously he takes most of the credit, but I want to take a little bit of credit. All right.
Wait. So you're taking credit?
It's just a little bit. 20 years ago, I asked Michael Cooper, I said, Mike, should you be in the Basketball Hall of Fame? And he kind of blew me off, laughed it off, and didn't answer the question. But I always thought this is a guy who should be considered for the Hall of Fame. Part of Showtime Lakers.
Absolutely.
All right. 5 NBA championships. 8 times he was named on the All-NBA defensive team. Once was named NBA Defensive Player of the Year. He's got a freaking, his alley-oop is named Koopaloop for crying out loud. Right. And so I thought he should have been considered up to this point. And I, over the last 20 years, I would throw it up. I'd think about that. I'd send it into the airwaves a little bit. Metaphysically, I think people started to say, you know what, maybe he should be considered. That's where I'm taking the credit. It might be a little bit of a stretch.
I'm going to call Coop and make sure that if he gets in, he gives you all the credit in the world.
He mentions you in his acceptance speech.
I don't need to stand out there and introduce him or anything. But Larry Bird called him the best defender he's ever faced.
Oh, and some of our younger listeners or viewers don't know who Michael Cooper is. You got to Google this guy because he was skinny as heck. He played. I wore long white socks playing sports because of Michael Cooper. Because Cooper wore socks all the way up to past his knee, and he has really skinny legs.
I did too, but I didn't realize it was because of Cooper.
Yeah, it was Cooper. Well, at least I did. Him and Billy Joe white shoes. They're the ones that wore socks and white shoes all the time.
But the other thing, if I may interrupt you there, is after his NBA career was over, he won 2 NBA championships or WNBA championships as a coach for the LA Sparks, and then he won one with the D League or G League in Albuquerque, whatever it was called at that time. Right. So he's got an extensive resume. I couldn't be happier for him.
And I will tell you, one day, I don't know if he'll ever get it, but he's pitched the head coaching job for the Lobos a few times.
Yeah.
And I think the crowd would love it. It's tough though because I told Coop before. I'd love to see his head coach of the Lobos, but if you lose and don't do well, like he's a god here. Like people love him here. I mean, he was at the Lobo game this year. They were honoring him one night. They didn't even announce him. He starts walking down the ramp. People recognize him. All you heard was Coop, Coop. Like they didn't even announce him, man. And then unfortunately, Shaq was there that night, so Shaq got a little bit of the spin. But no, I went over and talked to Coop, and then I've met Shaq before. He probably don't remember when I lived in L.A. Big human being. but it was great to have two like big time legends in the pit for a while. Yeah, it was pretty cool. Well, Tracy, one of the things I want to talk about today, because you brought this up the other day about streaming sports.
Yeah.
I got some numbers, and my friends always tell me I'm too statistically sometimes. Yes. I want to say it was the Kansas City Buffalo. One of the playoff games, I already forgot what it was.
It was Kansas City, Miami.
Kansas City, Miami was on Peacock, streaming only. I know there's a couple other games. It's coming. It's part of it.
And even Thursday Night Football's on Prime, too.
Right. Which, I got to admit, sometimes I forget. Right. And they're not the best games, right? They're not the best competitive games. But tell me your concern, because I know you brought that up this week.
I mean, it's not so much a concern for me, but I have seen, in some of the feeds I follow on Facebook, that consumers are unhappy with this because they feel like to keep up with their teams, it's another thing that they have to pay for. I'm paying for this cable, I'm paying for this service, whatever, whether it be Netflix or whatever that doesn't have any sports. And then they're like, now I got to pay $5, $10, $15 a month for whatever just to follow my team. And they think that's unfair that, going cordless, cutting cable was supposed to save them money, and now they're spending just as much or more on the different streaming services. So as, somebody who's been in that broadcast world, what are your thoughts on that?
Well, I want to hear Mike's thoughts first before I give you my thoughts, because my thoughts are all about money, because it's all about money when it comes to NFL, and it's all about money when it comes to sports, by the way.
We're not going back. It's not happening. We're not going back, and it's just, it stinks. In my opinion, but that's the way it is. My question is, and maybe it's just me because of my internet service. I don't think the quality has been very good when I watch, say, Iowa. I watched women's soccer last night. It ends up buffering a lot. So maybe that's just a poor connection that I've got.
I bought the game, was not going to do it. Decided I wanted to watch the game, so I had to pay the $6. Right, kept it for 30 days. I canceled it. Okay, yes, it was grainy. It was part of the buffing. It's not broadcast television, even that it's broadcasters. So the quality probably wasn't as good. Let me just give you some numbers, because back then I did my social media post, and NBC announced like the next week. So 22 million Americans, not worldwide, 22 million Americans subscribed to Peacock that week, right, and paid $6.
And that's for the NFL game you were talking about.
That's for the NFL game. Sorry, that was for the Miami.
Playoff.
That was for the Miami Buffalo game.
Kansas City,
Miami Kansas City game.
Yep.
And I wasn't going to do it, and I did it. NBC Peacock paid $110 million for the rights just to do that one game. Okay, so the post all over social media was the NFL is just getting greedy. They charged $110 million. Now keep in mind, I came from CBS World, so okay, just put in perspective, they charged everybody $6. Okay. 22 million times 6, that's $132 million, right? So they paid 110. So literally NBC netted basically $20 million just off that game. They netted $20 million. Their production was probably $1.5 million, right? So they netted about $18 million. Well, people don't take into consideration the average game, that playoff game. They generated another $45 million in advertising. Even that you paid for the streaming, you still got your TV commercials.
Right.
Right? Mm-hmm. So they paid another $45 million. So NBC, I'm estimating, made $65 million. So the NFL paid the NFL made $110 million. NBC Peacock probably netted between $60 and $65 million. And think about this. If 10% of those subscribers stay with Peacock and pay the $6 a month, it's another $145 million to NBC Peacock. So when people say the NFL is getting greedy, and not really, they're just paying, they're charging what everybody's going to be making. And again, 22 million people paid for that game.
Right.
So who's to blame?
And
The viewer or the NFL? The NFL is just capitalizing on an opportunity that people want to watch.
They probably gain more because it just so happened that the game that Caitlin Clark broke the all-time scoring record happened to already be scheduled to exclusively stream on Peacock. So there was a lot of Iowa, a lot of basketball fans tuning in probably for just that game too.
Oh, absolutely. And again, I don't think it's going to go away. I'm a Raider fan. You don't get all the Raider games.
My apologies.
We'll be there. We'll be there. But my point is I don't really buy the NFL package, but I got Red Zone, so I get to watch the Raiders when I want. And but if the Raiders were on Peacock and I had to pay $6, I'd pay $6 to watch the Raiders, right? And again, my choice. But I keep trying to explain to people, this is what's driving all these contracts. This is what's driving college football. This is what's driving NCAA basketball. This is what's driving the NFL. So don't judge a player when he's getting $700 million to go pitch for the Dodgers, right?
And hit.
Don't blame the player. He's just capitalizing on his ability. And if that organization wants to pay him that organization ain't going broke. So that means they're going to be making that money. And don't get upset if you have to turn around and pay a fee because all of a sudden the Dodgers are going to be streaming on Dodgers.com.
No, you can be upset about it.
Well, then just don't watch.
Well, that's the thing.
I got friends that complain and complain. I'm like, turn off the TV.
Yeah, but
speak with your money.
Tracy and I, and we all have our deep-rooted fandom, who we're rooting for. And then all of a sudden you want more and more and more. It gets a little frustrating. It does.
Welcome to capitalism.
Mr. Big Shot TV, defending
I'm just telling
TV.
You what, this is America, man. This is capitalism at its best. And professional athletes, college athletes, it's about money. It's about capitalism. And this is why they do it. So, okay, as we wrap up the show, I hope people enjoyed the show. Any last thoughts before we wrap up the show and things we didn't cover this week?
Oh, I'm sure there's a lot we didn't cover, but we'll come to it another time.
I'll tell you what, I'm busy this time of the year because we got state wrestling, state swimming, then we get to the state basketball tournament, high school variety. So,
well, one of the things we're going to talk about after the show that I want to bring to the show is I do want to start featuring a little bit more of local players, local athletes. You guys are more in that world. Mike, you're more in that world. So we should talk about that because I think that would be a great idea for the show to bring some local flavor to it, to showcase some players and stuff like that when we get a chance. Right, anyway, thank you guys again. I hope you guys enjoyed the show. But this is Jeff.
And I'm Mike Powers.
Tracy Goldeisen.
This is The Other Side of Sports. Thanks for joining us today.